Explain the purpose of at request mapping annotation. The at request mapping annotation in Spring MVC is used to match web requests to specific methods in a controller. It sets the URL pattern and HTTP methods like get and post that methods handle. This helps direct incoming requests to the right method based on the URL and request type, making it easier to manage web requests and responses. How can you define method level mappings within a controller? To define a method level mappings in a controller, use the at request mapping annotation on each method. Specify the URL pattern and the HTTP method like get and post. The methods should handle. This allows different methods in the same controller to handle different URLs or request types, making it easy to manage and how requests are processed. What are the attributes available in at request mapping? The at request mapping annotation in Spring MVC has several attributes to set up web requests. These include value or path to define the URL method, to specify the HTTP method like get or post, params for request parameters, header for HTTP headers, consumes to indicate the content type the method can handle, produces a response content type, and name for naming the mapping. How does at request mapping handle different types of HTTP requests? At request mapping handles different types of HTTP requests using the method attribute. This attribute lets us specify which HTTP method like get, post, put, delete the method should handle. For example, at request mapping, that is value equals to some slash some example method equal to request method dot get handles get requests, and request mapping value equal to example method equal to request method dot post handles post requests. This allows one URL to support different requests. What are the differences between at controller and at rest controller annotations? At controller and at rest controller are used in Spring MVC. At controller is for web controllers that return web pages and needs at response body on each method to send data like JSON. At rest controller is a shortcut for creating RESTful web services. It combines at controller and at response body, so it automatically sends JSON or XML data without needing at response body on each method. In what scenarios would you use at rest controller over at controller? Use at rest controller when we need to create APIs that send data like JSON or XML directly to clients. It makes things easier by combining at controller and at response body, so we don't need to add at response body to each method. This is ideal for creating web services for front-end applications. Use at controller when our application needs to return web pages or views. How does the response handling differ between these two annotations? With at controller, we return pages or views. We need at response body on methods to send JSON data. With at rest controller, we don't need at response body because it automatically sends JSON or XML responses. At controller is used for traditional web apps with web pages, while at rest controller is used for web services that send data directly to clients. What are the implications of using at rest controller for data serialization? Using at rest controller means our data is automatically turned into JSON or XML, making it easier to create APIs. We don't need to add at response body to each method, which simplifies our code. This is great for sending data directly to clients, but it also means we can't easily return web pages or views from same controller. How do you manage form data in Spring MVC? In Spring MVC, manage form data using at model attribute to bind form fields to a model objects. Create a method in our controller with at post mapping. to handle form submission. This method can accept the model object as a parameter, use at request param to bind individual fields if needed. For validation, use at valid and a binding result objects to check for errors and handle them accordingly. How can you handle form submission in Spring MVC? To handle form submission in Spring MVC, use at post mapping in our controller to create a method for processing the form. Use at model attribute to bind form fields to a model object. For validation, add at valid to the model object and include a binding parameter for handling errors. We can also use at request param for individual fields after processing. Return a view name or a direct to another URL.